Like we have an abundance of very pretty things to put on the wall, and we're just going to have more pretty things every year. And ultimately the value of a pretty thing is kind of like, like it's pretty fungible. So it's like, how do you impact the culture, and how do you tell your story, and how do you imbue your work with who you are? We all come from different places. Like we all have different experiences, some harder than others. And I feel like the more personal you can make your art, the more specific you can make your art, the more you can make your art so much about you that it's very difficult for anybody else to come in and make the same piece. I think when you can tell that story about yourself, tell that story with your art, and then impact the culture, I think then you've started creating some really like impactful, meaningful, like important artwork.
Alejandro, we are back. NFT Now podcast.
We're back like we never left, but we did leave. Just like my background, we've been doing a lot of movement, a lot of packing, But one thing that's different this time around for our podcast is that after 3 years and over 120 episodes, we have brought on a really important partner that aligns with our mission, our vision of empowering the creators of culture and bringing digital and on-chain art from niche to mainstream. Matt, let's dive into it. Tell us more about this partnership, man.
Yeah, man. So this is a really exciting partnership. We are going to be partnering with LG Art Lab to bring digital art to millions of screens worldwide. We are going to be curating the upcoming drops for their LG Art Lab marketplace and helping guide its expansion into Ethereum. And so as part of that, they are also sponsoring all of our properties. And this episode is brought to you then by LG Art Lab, a digital art gallery that you can enjoy at home. LG Art Lab transforms your living room into a world-class gallery, enhancing accessibility, allowing art lovers to enjoy their digital collections on LG OLED TVs. And now integrated with the Ethereum blockchain, LG Art Lab lets you collect, trade, and display digital artwork seamlessly on lgartlab.com.
Man, I couldn't think of a more perfect partner for this, because this is a very important step for the digital art community. LG is such a perfect partner for digital artists, right? Like they have the OLED TV, which is one of the best TVs for pixels and colors and things of distribution, but they also have a distribution element, and one of the things that I love about them is that they've always been authentically supporting the community. They were our partners in 2021 for the first Gateway, and then they joined us again last year on Gateway Korea and Gateway Miami. And now, after many years of the making, they've actually transitioned to Ethereum mainnet, which is happening on August 19th with an artist that we are interviewing for this episode. But Matt, who is the artist that's helping spearhead this, and let us know what we're talking about?
Yeah, no, really excited to kick off this episode with Amadon. Patrick Amadon has been a really notable digital artist who's been, kind of making waves in the space for a few years now. Many people know him for his No Rioters artwork that was featured on a Hong Kong billboard and made international headlines with the political kind of messaging that he concealed in there. Patrick's never been afraid to make his voice heard. He's also never been afraid to be a pioneer and embrace new platforms. His Disobedience drop, sold out across Ethereum, Bitcoin Ordinals, Solana, Arbitrum, and Base. And I think he's just a great artist to be kicking things off for this exciting partnership.
That's amazing, man. And one of the things that I'm really looking forward to is seeing his transition from a graffiti artist into a digital artist, because he's been in the game for years, even before NFTs came through. So I'm excited to see how that social graph that he's had over the course of the years has expanded, and what his vision is for the future, and how he's implemented what he's learned around innovation, technology, and also social impact comes together. Anything else that you got thinking about, Matt?
I think that covers it, man. So look, I think without further ado, let's get into it with Amadon. Patrick Amadon on the NFT Now podcast. Long time in the making, man. How you feeling?
I'm good. I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate what you guys do for the space tremendously. So happy to hop on and chat.
Amazing, man.
Go ahead, Matt. Go ahead. Let's rock it.
Amazing, man. Well, let's dive in, man. Let's, for those who don't know, just give us a little bit about your background, your journey into digital art.
Sure. Thank you. I was in traditional art before all of this, and I found social media in 2012, and I post photos of physical work that I'd done, whether it was oil painting or that was graffiti, but like very quickly realized like I just felt like something was off, like something didn't translate to the digital space. Everything looked so much better in the real world than it did in pixels. So I tried to figure like, okay, if that's not working, like how do I translate physical work to digital and have it feel native to the space? So I started digging in with like distorting images, glitching images, just warping images, mostly code based. So I really like just destroying code and then watching the images become very like disturbed. And apparently that kind of became glitch, which is kind of which is funny. A decade later, it's actually popular. Back then, it just felt like a interesting way to like make images feel native to the space, and just kind of went down that rabbit hole. But people really quickly started liking the glitch stuff more than the actual physical stuff, and I got kind of orphaned in this no man's land in art where the thing I liked making, you couldn't sell. And people online, everybody wanted to see the glitchy digital stuff, and the physical stuff was kind of boring. So just was making art for the likes, really, because there wasn't much you could do with it at the time. Until
What was your first? What was that first interaction with glitch art and selling? What was like that feeling when you're like, okay, when did you start seeing momentum pick up on the glitch art, like actually picking up from an actual sales perspective?
I wasn't ever able to sell it until I found NFTs. But it became really popular, kind of 2012, 2013, 2014. I got reasonably well known for it and had a pretty big following online. 2016, I was talking to Jerry Saltz about it, and I was just feeling a little creatively stuck, because I was doing political stuff on one side. I was doing stuff about like the Syrian Civil War, Ferguson, Missouri, Boris Nemtsov, just stuff that I cared about. And the other side, I was just doing kind of abstract glitches, like just glitch of these abstract paintings I was doing. But I didn't feel like it was doing what I needed for me personally. I loved doing it, but at the same time, like I felt like the thing I cared about and the thing that I was making for art were like separate tracks entirely. So I asked him what he thought about it, and he said it's pure zombie formalism. You got to start over. And I thought about it for a little bit and realized what he was saying was right. What I was doing wasn't like just glitching abstract stuff wasn't like conceptually or creatively fulfilling to me. It didn't feel like just the nature of glitching something didn't give it any real substance. It was still just a glitch version of this thing, which kind of didn't have substance to begin with. So I took a step back for a minute and then realized like he was right. And then at that point, I started combining the two. So instead of just doing political stuff on one track and digital stuff on this other track, I combined them in my pieces, and it just kind of clicked at that point. I started making stuff that I really cared about, and everything kind of rapidly accelerated from there. So I was really grateful that for his feedback on that, because it's it's really tough because like so much of what you get in social media is either just they hate it, and that's at least you're like irritating or affecting somebody, or they love it, but it's really tough to get like legitimate, like sincere, thoughtful feedback on your work. So I just always really appreciated him for that, and I really have to credit that interaction with kind of setting you down a direction that I'm really happy with now.
I love that, man. obviously, I think for many people, they became a lot of people became aware of your work, due to the coverage around rioters and the political statement you made there. Can you just tell us a bit about that work and what went into it and what you wanted to achieve with it?
No, appreciate it. I mean, I feel like you just have the range of possibilities and you create a piece, whether it's like sales, whether it's reception, you kind of like, I wonder how this is going to go. And you never really know because so much of it's out of your control once you release it. I've been following the protests for a long time. I remember the handover, the original handover, following the umbrella movement and just following this recent round. And I don't know, this one really resonated because it was a bunch of students in the street getting beaten by the police. And they showed up day after day, tear gas, getting shot, getting abducted, getting tortured. And they kept coming back and just knowing that you're fighting the Chinese government as a group of 20-year-olds in Hong Kong just felt like something you knew you would lose, and yet they showed up anyway and just suffered all of the consequences for it because it mattered to them. On the other side of that, you kind of look at the U.S. and the Western countries, and we take so much of our freedom for granted. I think there's a lot of things that we just feel are inalienable rights, but in reality, they're fragile, and we're a legislative session away from them just vanishing. You look at privacy, you look at right to body, you look at the ability to assemble, the ability to speak. I mean, so many of these fundamental freedoms are really precarious. So watching them fight through that and watching them resist that, I don't know. I just feel like it's kind of canary in the coal mine. It's a very cautionary tale of what could happen to the rest of us. And I think that made it real for me. And I think it made it real for a lot of people around the world, saying this was like a beautiful democracy 2 decades ago. And now all of a sudden they've been completely dismantled into this vassal surveillance state. You couple that with like the art world saying, oh, look, Hong Kong is back. Hong Kong is back. And they were so willing to just look at the current situation and just disregard everything that all these protesters went through because they wanted convenient access to a good art market. So the art world's reaction to that, coupled with just having followed these guys, I just wanted to do something in support. And when this company came to me and said, hey, we'd like to put you up on a billboard in the middle of Hong Kong for Art Week, I don't know, it felt like too good of an opportunity to pass up. So I wanted to do a piece in support, in solidarity with the protesters, which is against the law. You're not even allowed to talk about the protesters. So I put up I try to figure how much I could get away with, because that's always the other thing is like, you could just put up everything you want to say, but then nobody would put it up on a billboard. They'd catch it early. So I was trying to figure out how much to fit in and still show something meaningful in support of them. So I don't know. I like Fight Club. I like when he like splices it there. It's like, okay, cool. Maybe they won't notice this. So I put in a couple images of the protesters' names, their ages, stories about them getting assaulted by the police, stories of journalists getting beaten up. Tried to record a lot of what was happening there on the ground while the protests were happening, and just share that with everybody. And sure enough, like nobody noticed. It went up. It was up for 3 days in the middle of Hong Kong. It's the largest billboard in Hong Kong too.
I know exactly what you're talking about. I know exactly where it is. I've spent a lot of time in Hong Kong.
Oh, amazing!
It's pretty epic that you went to. Yeah.
And then
so what was the call? So how did people find out? And what call did you get? What was that conversation like? Like, hey, sorry, you're not allowed to show your art. What was that conversation like?
There was like one guy who was taking photos of it from the street. And the Hong Kong Free Press found out about it, and they called me. And then all of a sudden, they wrote an article, and then the next day, like it was chaos. The Western press found out about it. The Chinese state media found out about it. So I'm getting phone calls from like BBC and Guardian and AP, Fox, ABC, like all of them. And on the other side, I've got the Chinese press counter programming saying I'm pro Rioter, which I loved. Very pro Rioter. Just immediately that day when all the press came out, a bunch of guys went to the billboard store and forced them to take it down. They called up the gallery and threatened them. The gallery was kind of freaked out about the whole thing. They reached out to me and said, "Hey, can you just please sign this legal document saying that we didn't know what you were doing?" So I signed this thing and I was like, "Yes, I tricked you and you didn't know," and hopefully absolve them of any liability with the Chinese government. But then the following week, caught a custom piece of malware that they'd sent to my computer. They'd built a script that was able to pop my computer off of HTML, which if you're in the space, like HTML has such a small attack surface. So they spent a fortune trying to like get me back. And now I have I checked a couple weeks ago. I still have an active arrest order in Hong Kong, and they have a new law. They added early this year saying if you're a foreign artist who puts up subversive work in Hong Kong, we're going to class you a foreign agent and subject you up to life in prison. So they're not playing around, and they have a very, very long memory. So there's no travel to China for me. No Chinese airlines. No Taiwan. I can go to Taiwan, but I can't go to like Thailand or Vietnam or any of the
Macau.
Yeah, I can't go to any of the satellite countries that have the police stations. So it's they haven't forgotten yet. So
they have a long memory.
What does this love for protest or for inciting and raising awareness come from? Was there a moment in your life where you were like, hey, this is important for me to incorporate, or this happened to me and I don't want other people to do so? Because your art really raises awareness for this in terms of free speech and inalienable rights and, human rights. Like, it's very, very powerful and very potent. Where does it come from?
I don't know. I think it just comes from just watching a lot of stuff happen and realizing like how close these people are to you. I mean, you just with like the protests, you just watch them and like, you just empathize with them. Like they're on the streets protesting the attack on just very basic rights. Like they just wanted to get in the street and protest a lot of these changes that were negatively impacting them and their voice, their ability to be heard, and represented kind of in the political system. And it was something I had for a long time that was taken away from them, criminalized getting together in public, criminalized free speech. I think people don't appreciate, especially in the US, like I feel like people don't appreciate what privacy means. I feel like a lot of what we operate from is this perspective like, well, why do you care if you have nothing to hide? Right? And you just watch kind of what's happened to social media and kind of the younger generation, and you just say like they don't care about privacy, but privacy
I gotta
is
ask
like,
you this in terms of the privacy aspect. I'm trying to interrupt because I gotta ask you this. What do you think about what's going on in the UK right now? With the prime ministers and all these commissioners and what's like them calling to censor social media and putting out this warrants for extradition or requests for arrest for people who break their laws internationally? What do you make of all this?
I think it's part of the erosion, and like with privacy is a shield for so many other basic freedoms. If you don't have privacy, it's so easy to take away freedom of speech. If you don't have privacy, it's so easy to take away freedom of assembly. So these fundamental freedoms that we all know really matter and we're all actually agreed upon are defended by privacy. Yes, there's some negative outliers that come with it, but by and large, like we just have to take the good with the bad because privacy is critical for preserving essential freedoms. Like with England, I had a friend message me the other day, and he shared an article about a guy walking by a surveillance camera in England. He covers his face. So I don't know. He just didn't feel like that camera looking at him today. And an hour later, the police show up at his house and say, "Why'd you cover your face?" I think that if that says anything, I feel like that's the direction that a lot of these countries are going. And I think that, I think the next like 5 or 10 years are going to be the most interesting 5 or 10 years in the last millennia, because of how rapidly AI will change so much about our daily lives. One of the things I'm concerned about is the abuse of AI surveillance. So, what's it look like in a world where your movements and your speech and everything else is tracked, processed, and very easily sorted by AI? So, I think that instance in England, what you said, and just this kind of anecdotal thing from my friend, I don't know. I feel like it's really on us to just do this as responsibly as we possibly can. The technology is not going anywhere. If we slow down development, China will win. And that's a dark world if they get to like general AI first. So I think we need like unchecked development of AI, but at the same time, I just think we just need broad awareness socially around the implications of this, so we can do our best to kind of hold off and head off a lot of the most challenging issues around that. So
Yeah. Well, Patrick, given your background there and given your interest and passion for these subjects, I'm curious, like, how do you how does that channel into your work with like blockchain based art, with like on chain art, and like being able to use, for example, cryptographic technology, using transparent and immutable transactions and ledgers?
Well, I think a lot of the problem is we see everybody ceding so much of our power to governments. I would like to see a return of a lot of these freedoms to kind of the security and, kind of give it back to the people. I think that crypto in general just represents, a decentralization of power. I think it represents, giving back a lot of the power in the financial system to us, at least the promise of it. I don't think they need to be in all our business. I don't think that every transaction needs to be monitored. I think the Patriot Act was well intended and then rapidly turned into the most like invasive tool, law, legislation that I think we've enacted in a very, very long time. I mean, that's like follow up to, you know, a lot of the other horrible stuff we kind of did in the past. So I just think that the abuse of power and the consolidation and surveillance and everything else, I just feel like we need our freedoms. And I feel like embracing blockchain is kind of embracing a decentralized future, which does place power, responsibility, and accountability, in our hands again. And, I think that a lot of people are going to get burned, but I think more people will benefit. And I just think it's really important to support ecosystems and systems and people that want to return our freedoms and want to return our power to us. So I think it's critical for development, especially now, especially with AI. I feel like AI is just like you take all of the trends we've experienced kind of socially, politically, economically, technically, and you just put this factor on it. Like it's an order of magnitude of increase of power and development and importance. AI just accelerates everything tremendously. So a lot of these like long simmering issues, I think we really have to address collectively and responsibly now, because it's just going to either get a whole lot worse or a whole lot better. I mean, I think it could go either way, but I just think it's going to require a lot of people, a lot of attention, a lot of awareness, which, most people aren't willing to give to anything other than their like TikTok feed. So
What do you think is the role of art and artists in order to raise awareness or participate in this messaging?
Well, I think we've just become so split as a society. There's like the people who read the New York Times and the people who read Fox. I don't think there's like a difference between them. I just think that everyone has kind of had to pick their lane, and there's very little tolerance for like a middle ground anymore. And I just don't think that text hits people the way that it used to. People are really just looking to confirm their biases. So they'll find that in whatever side of the fence they're on. And I just feel like because of that, you can show somebody one thing, and if it doesn't agree with them, they're just going to disregard it. Art, on the other hand, art has the power to cut through that in a very different way. I think in so many ways, like you just need people to consider a new idea on either side to kind of develop a healthy dialogue about anything. And I feel like art has a real ability to just shake people a little bit and get them to consider something new, which I guess in our current environment is everything. Because there aren't very many other tools that we have to get people to step back and say, hey, you know what, have I thought about this? Did I think about that? Yeah, so I think that art just plays a really, really important role in helping people ask questions.
Yeah, man, fully agreed with that, and I think that ties in really nicely. Obviously, we recently announced our partnership with LG Art Lab. We're working with them to bring digital art to millions of screens worldwide, and to curate artists for the drop, and help guide their expansion into Ethereum. And what's really exciting is having you as the first featured artist for the platform. I know your piece, Passive Observer, will be their Ethereum debut, and so I'd love to hear a bit about that project, and also how everything you were just discussing about the role of art and artistry ties into really bringing this to the masses.
Yeah, well, I just want to say, first of all, I want to thank you both tremendously for setting this up. It means a lot to me. And I've been pretty publicly against partnering with any companies before. I'm just very protective over what I feel the role and the place of art is, and especially remaining free from kind of outside influences or money kind of behind it, which runs counter to kind of what I think I want to be doing. This is different, and I think that seeing somebody give an opportunity like this to so many artists to have their work be seen, I think is a big step forward for digital art. I think that what defines digital art is its accessibility, whether that's creating it, whether that's collecting it, whether that's experiencing it, and I think that something like this, offering digital art to so many different people in so many different places, in a distribution network like that, I think it really amplifies the potential impact that we can have with our work. And that's something that I really think is worth getting behind. It seems like a really healthy step forward. And I love to see digital art and digital artists being highlighted like this and being made a priority. Art, I don't think that we should be a niche. And I don't think that art necessarily has to be a niche, especially just kind of for the, the wealthy and the privileged, right? Like we're not doing like a Chelsea gallery walk. Like this is about like
Right.
delivering art to the people. And, I think our ability to impact the world comes down to our ability to, get our art in front of people. And I think that, where digital art becomes more important than traditional art has been, is I think in distribution. And I think this is an interesting step towards that. I think that the ability to, share your work and get the message out, and I think matters tremendously. And I think it's ultimately things like this are ultimately how we show people what you can actually achieve with digital art. And that's ultimately going to empower all the artists, so many artists around the world. It's going to make it interesting for the collectors. I think it's just going to raise the profile of digital art in a really, really healthy way. Because, it's been kind of the bastard child of the art world for a very long time. We're not the first digital artists. We watched early computer art, we've watched flash art, we've watched net art, we've watched a lot of really brilliant artists just suffer in obscurity and die poor from their art because there wasn't a vehicle to transact, and there wasn't a very good vehicle to share their work. So I mean, everything we're doing is built on lots of movements before us. We're just the fortunate ones who happen to be here at the right time because tokenization kind of unlocks everything. But I just feel like it's important to embrace really distribution of digital art. I think that's really how we move forward.
I love that concept. It's like a lot of people forget that a lot of people had to walk for us to run, right? I don't even think that we're running yet. I think a lot of people crawled, a lot of artists, a lot of like giants had to crawl for us to walk right now, right? I don't think we even start hitting the running phase of digital art. But I'd love to dive deeper into your piece, man. Like, what was the inspiration behind us? What's the title of it? Like, what motivated it? Let's just get into it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I was really happy with how this one turned out. Kind of a lot of what we're talking about. I mean, even we talked about Hong Kong, we talk about Ukraine, we talk about all these kind of situations around the world. We talk about watching what's happening in England. We talk about what's happening with riots in France. I mean, so much of what's happening in the world right now, we kind of just watch it. We kind of sit back and consume the news, are interested by it. But I guess the question is kind of what do you do about it? I mean, are we just we're kind of passively observing, passively being fed, and we just, there's a disconnect between what we experience digitally and how we engage with the world in a real way. I guess it ultimately doesn't matter how aware you are of something if nothing is being done about it. So we have this, like you look at like something like Ukraine, right? We have a lot of people just watching Russia invade Ukraine. We are watching them fight. We see the echoes of terrible events in history past, and watching it kind of play out again there. But where's the kind of collective will behind fighting this? So much of it is like we've just kind of evolved into just a very passive experience of the world because we're behind our screens. And I feel like that's kind of the direction I wanted to go down. I just think it's kind of critical to embrace the real world as much as it is the digital world, and just appreciate that, while we consume digitally, we still have a shared responsibility for what happens in the real world besides just, entertaining us.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And I think that it's interesting, that you mentioned that you had previously said you wouldn't partner, or really release like in partnership with a company. We're obviously really happy to have you be a part of this. What was it about sort of the opportunity with LG that kind of stood out and made a difference?
I think it's like authenticity and sincerity. I think that somebody wanting to build a platform that elevates artists is very different than somebody wanting to build a platform to, make a bag. And I feel like you've seen so much of this happen in our space. You see everything from like the meme coins to just these like very pandery companies that, I don't know. I feel like, when you see it, right? Like, I feel like it's just like, it's kind of just a gut check. And it just feels like what they built is actually something that could help a lot of people. And whether it's through this, whether it's 404 Foundation, like I think discoverability, accessibility, and distribution of art is kind of key. I think that we have a kind of an unlimited potential as a space. I think that digital art as a movement could be the most significant from like an art historical and actual real world impact that we've ever seen in art. And I just want to support and see more people doing real things to enable this movement, enable the artists, enable the people that are here to participate meaningfully and actually have an impact on the real world. And I think a lot of that starts with distribution and discovery. And I think that this is a very interesting foray, and I can't think of another example of a company that has the resources like this and the distribution options like this stepping in and saying, hey, we see you, we recognize what you all are doing, and we want to build something to support that because it matters. So, it's kind of
I couldn't agree more about it.
Easy yes on that one.
I love that easy yes, but I want to talk about the hard yes, because I want to give you and some of our listeners some context. Like, what may look like LG coming into the marketplace as just like a thing of like, hey, they're just coming in. It's been 3 years in the making. Like, this partnership, this relationship has been 3 years in the making. They first participated in our first gateway. Then they participated in Korea and Miami last year. And believe it or not, you have a small team of passionate people inside LG Art Lab who are incredibly dedicated to really empowering the creators of culture and bringing this technology from niche to mainstream. Like, I got to give them a huge shout out, because they really are, like you said, it's an incredibly authentic mission for them. Like, it's a small team within a large corporation where they've been really grinding for 3 years to bring this to the mainstream element that they're now entering into. Like, for example, like the expansion into Ethereum took years for legal to clear it, right? Like, most people don't really understand the big wheels that need to turn within a corporation of this size to just simply adopt what you and I see very simply. Is like, oh yeah, I'll mint something on Ethereum. Let me go to Transient Labs, or let me just like do a contract really quickly. Yeah, let's mint it. Boom, done. Right? Like, a legal corporation such as like massive like LG needs to go in through its checks and balances for this, right? So like, their commitment to this is long term. Like, I've never, similar to you, for us, it was incredibly important to make sure that whoever we partner with was in it for a transformational relationship with artists, right? And so like, seeing Yuna, Suhi, and Yaram, who are the team behind this, who are spearheading it, put up these kind of like almost manifest destiny like missions of like, we want to manifest this into reality internally, and we'll go through whatever motions we need to, right? And make sure that this is actually artist centric, has been so powerful. Like, I can't tell you how many times in all of our conversations over the course of the 3 years, they've always been focused on the art. Like, it's so crazy how even they know who the artists are, and like, when we introduce them or show them their names, you should have seen. I was telling you offline before we got on. When we mentioned your name, that you were interested to the team, you should have seen how their jaws dropped of like, what? Oh my God, this is so amazing. Like, Patrick Amadon, oh my God, he wants to be the spearhead. Holy cow. Oh, this is so mind blowing. Like, can't believe it. Like, like, I can't tell you how awesome it feels that you see the authenticity that this team is bringing to this platform, right? And one of the things I want to mention is that this is not going to be an overnight thing, right? Like, this is not like, hey, it's a splash, like, boom, it's going to be mainstream, like, right away. But they really are putting incredible resources that no other companies are going to be doing, right? Like, they're putting your art on one of their best screens in the world, the OLED TV, right? Like, that is amazing. Like, it's one of the best like pixel color distribution elements. That's going to be very wild, right? They're giving artists mainstream distribution and out of home, and putting some of the art and the marketing behind in millions of TVs across homes. And that's just like, it may be a small step for LG, but it's a huge step for us as a digital art community. And I can tell you this from our personal experience, and Matt can chime in if he wants, but like, I've rarely seen a Web2 company or a traditional company of the size of LG have so much passion and commitment and perseverance around this. Like, this has been a 3-year project for them, right? Like, this wasn't like, oh, hey, we're going to do it like in March, they were like, hey, we're going to do this and launch it next. No, they've been working on this since 2021. So just wanted to provide that context to our listeners, provide it for you, because I love that you picked up on that authenticity, because that's really important.
That's awesome. I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah, and I think that I really appreciated your like willingness to try new things, to spearhead new movements, to embrace different platforms. Your the dissidents. The drop comes to mind where you actually released across multiple blockchains in a way I'd never actually seen that before. Across ordinals, across Ethereum, across Base, Arbitrum, Solana, I believe, and that was a big success. And so I'd love to hear, maybe touch on that as well, and also like just where does that come from? That willingness to be a pioneer.
No, I appreciate it. Thank you for noticing. I don't know. We're at the beginning of all of this. Like we're still just very early to this. We don't have a lot of the tooling built out. We have a lot of people that are really well intentioned. If there's something that should be built, like there's somebody here who will build it. I think right now we're just kind of in the phase where all ideas are valid and worth exploring. And I just think there's a very interesting kind of collaborative communal effort towards just building this ecosystem out in the healthiest way possible. Again, thank you to you guys. I think like what you're doing to help, talk about art in the space and kind of bringing a lot of contextualization to this and help bring the stories to life, I think matters tremendously. I think we're all doing this together, and I just feel like it's an interesting period in time right now because we're not like in an extractive phase. I would say like people have obviously tried to do that, some sadly quite successfully. But I think like collectively, I think we're all building something together really interesting. So happy to just kind of contribute when I can. Like with doppelganger, I had the idea like, well, there's no technical reason why there has to be a single pointer for each token. It's a failure point for me to see like to just have your token tied to one link. So I was like, cool, why don't we just build like an index? And then, friends with the transient guys to just like reach out to them like, hey guys, let's build a token with an index. And they're like, oh, cool, good idea. A day later, they have the doppelganger contract created. And, I think like they crossed 250,000 works in index-based contracts. And, they got a 7160 approved by the foundation, which is a index-based contract. So it's just cool to see that happen. But it's also like, I just think like CCO resonates with me. Like like with the doppelganger contract, it was like they asked me when it was over, like, hey, can we like expand on this and turn it into like put together a proposal to get their number. And I was like, yeah, cool, run with it, go for it. Like I think CCO and just kind of the idea that like we free up our creations and we free up our ideas to let other people build and iterate and riff on them to just advance more rapidly. I don't know, that resonates with me, and just it's cool to see all the CCO work. It's cool to see people building on that. It's cool to see what Transient did with like the doppelganger contract. Like it's fun to see people iterate on other ideas without people being so protective and hoarding it and suing each other for, intellectual theft. Like, like we move a lot faster this way. And, ultimately like what I want to see happen is like, you look at stories like Osanachi, you look at stories like IX Shells. We have so many stories of artists in this space coming from backgrounds that traditionally wouldn't have access to the art market. Like, yes, they could, but no. I mean, really, like practically no. I mean, so many artists here like aren't. You're not New York, London, Paris, or LA. Like, it's going to be really, really tough to have like your work seen in a gallery and then actually make a career out of this. And look what we've done in the span of a couple of years. Like, we've enabled a lot of artists from around the world to like either make their living or at least contribute to it in a significant way from art. We've never had that before. You talk to a lot of collectors, you you have a lot of people that are coming. Again, they're not in the big cities. Like, how do you experience art if you're not in a big city? You have to drive to a big city, right? And here we are. We have collectors from around the world in places that otherwise don't have access to this art, being able to collect art and experience that and have it be a meaningful part of their life. Like, I don't know, like, we've done an incredible job to like expand outward. And I just feel like so much of this is because we collectively kind of work on this together, and we build together. So like with the multi-chain release, like, I don't know, like, I'm not a trader. I'm not an Ethereum spec. I have no incentive to like watch Ethereum like go up at the expense of other chains. Like, I just want to see kind of it all bubble up. And like, Ethereum has a different community than Sol, which has a different community than Bitcoin, which has a different community than Base. Like, it's like different cities. And I feel like as an artist, if you're not building relationships in kind of all of the different places, you're just leaving a lot of people kind of out of the room on art that they might resonate really well with. Like, if you did a Venn diagram of the space, like, I think there's much smaller area of overlap if you compared like BTC and ETH collectors than you might expect. So I don't know. And so I just kind of feel like the chain is the chain, art is the art. I mean, I think like ultimately, like, I don't think there should be much of a value difference based on the chain art is on. And I think that artists should be able to release freely across the chains without feeling like pressure to do one or the other, or this is the Cadillac chain, this is the trash chain. Like, there's, I feel like, I don't know. I feel like a lot of it's just like normalizing things and helping people like see that like it's not about the chain, kind of, it's about the art. Now, granted, like, the chain has to be durable and last, otherwise your art's gonna have problems down the road. So, that's not carte blanche.
Right.
But at the same time, like,
still got the quality.
Some cities do shut down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Some cities do. I love that analogy of like seeing chains as different cities, right? Like, yo, you got to like, because when you explain it to her, I love that analogy. I actually want to expand on that, because like when you bring an opportunity to an artist and you're like, hey, I'd love for you to create an art piece for Paris, right? Just that. And they're like, yes, I would love to, right? Or, hey, I would love for you to create an art piece for Hong Kong, like in your case. Or I love to create one for Medellin or New York, Miami, Cape Town, whatever it may be. The artists are really eager to jump on it. And they're like, yeah, look, like, I'm down for whatever city. And it's so interesting to see that mental model applied to change as like, hey, it's a different city, it's a different community, it's a different culture, it's a different language. And I'm going to run with it sometimes, man. I'm going to take this with me, because that's a really great perspective to put into it. Yeah. I have a question for you, man. Like, because you're just dropping wisdom here. You're just dropping some great bombs. And it's very rare to see artists who are socially ingrained actually put their work towards that impact, right? Like, a lot of people are keyboard warriors, right? Like, they do the Instagram post, or they do the tweet, or they create something that goes beyond the digital, right? But like, you actually take the steps, you actually inform yourself, you're educating yourself. What advice would you give to rising digital artists that are coming up or coming together or exploring this medium within that concept of the socially engaged elements?
The art doesn't matter.
Expand on that, actually. That's actually,
Well, I think there's a couple things. Like, one, I think like the art and artist are inseparable. Like, all three of us could draw the same exact thing and it would mean completely different things because of who we are and our backgrounds. I think that we're seeing a rapid commoditization of aesthetic because of AI. Like, it's very easy to create something that looks cool with AI. And if it's easier to create things that are cool, then you kind of ask like, okay, well, what's next? Like, why did you create this? Like, what's interesting about this? Like give me something else, So I think realizing like art and artists are inseparable, the artist's story, and this is why, again, a big reason like part of why I love you guys. Like, you have to know the artist's story to appreciate the art fully. Like, it matters. Like, the artist's story affects the art. So you have to understand that. But the art really, like, I don't know, like, you have to impact the culture. For stuff to resonate, for stuff to stick around, for stuff to be relevant, a year, 3, 5, 10, 20 years from now, it's not about like the whatever impact you have now. Like, you could drop the coolest thing in the world and people are like, great. But like, if it doesn't impact the culture, it's not going to be very relevant down the road. Like, we have an abundance of very pretty things to put on the wall. And we're just going to have more pretty things every year. And ultimately, the value of a pretty thing is kind of like, like, it's pretty fungible. But so it's like, how do you impact the culture, and how do you tell your story, and how do you imbue your work with who you are? We all come from different places. Like, we all have different experiences, some harder than others. And I feel like the more personal you can make your art, the more specific you can make your art, the more you can make your art so much about you that it's very difficult for anybody else to come in and make the same piece. I think when you can tell that story about yourself, tell that story with your art, and then impact the culture, I think then you've started creating some really like impactful, meaningful, like important artwork. And I feel like those are the people, which is harder to find because like we have just like, it's a bit of a desert from a writing contextualization, help artists get their story out perspective right now. I think that there's a handful of people doing that work right now, and it's tremendously appreciated. I think that will get backfilled a lot in the future. I think that as we have these projects like LG that puts like stuff in like 1 million homes, I think that the more exposure digital art gets, the more interest there will be down the road for people to go back and say, wait a minute, like, let's look at who was all creating work, let's analyze their work. And this will all be post type, like whatever circus right now you got to run the 3-ring circus to be successful on Twitter, right? Like, it is just like the nature of the space,
oh man, that's true.
It's not, I'm not saying it's bad, I'm not saying it's good either, but it's like, it just is what it is. Like, you have to be able to get your own story out right now. I think in like 10, 20 years, there's going to be a lot of interest in this period right now, and a lot of people will be looking back. Kind of similar to kind of what you see with like the auction houses right now. They're digging back. They're like, oh, the original computer art. Let's talk about like early computer art. Let's talk about some of the early AI stuff. Like, they're going back 10, 20, 30 years right now and saying, oh, this. And as much as I have an issue with like tokenizing stuff that wasn't created to be tokenized, I think it's important to just know like, oh, they're actually just looking back over a period of a decade or two, identifying what they feel has an interesting story, and then kind of pulling that into the future. So I think for a lot of artists, so much of it's just like avoiding pandering to whatever the current interest is right now, focusing on like intensely personal, meaningful work to them, and then just having faith that their story will come out slowly, hopefully, or at least it will come out in time. And then looking back, you'll say like, oh wait, I didn't know them at the time, but they're actually making really good stuff. So I just think it's really important to like think about this as like a long play. I don't think that digital art will be any less relevant a decade from now than it is now. I think this is the least relevant digital art will ever be at this point moving forward. And the same, it's like it's the argument for crypto as well. Like, I feel like you just look at something and say, will this be more or less important, like in a broad political, social, economic standpoint in the future versus now? So I don't know. I feel like that's the case for art. Like, I just think that art will be, with all of the options we have to distribute art and share art and message and story and everything else, like I can see art having a really nice renaissance moment where what we're all doing becomes more part of the fabric of how we live our lives on a day-to-day basis. And because of that, I feel like the artists right now, the collectors right now, the people that are in this space right now, will be rewarded, well, for obviously what was taking a huge gamble, at the time, which is, now for us. So.
Yeah. One thing I like about you, Patrick, is you've never shied away from like sharing your opinions. They're sometimes spur conversation, sometimes a bit controversial. I'm curious, like current market context, current climate, all that. Like, what would you say is like, like maybe like your least popular, or like hottest take that you got right now that you're feeling?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know. I feel like this is the best time to be making stuff right now. Look, like, yeah, it's hard to make a living right now with art, but at the same time, like, I don't know, I'm coming from a decade of not being able to sell art at all. When X got into space, he'd sell something for $40 and was happy about it because, like, again, like you weren't able to sell art before. So I just think like right now, especially when there's less noise, it's easier to be heard. So the people that are doubling down right now, making art, figuring it out, like, you should have a side job or whatever you need to survive during this period, and there's no shame in that at all. But your side job, whatever you're doing, should exist to empower you to make art, as much of it as you can, while still being able to like pay your rent. It's just such an opportunity right now to make your work. Complaining about the market, I feel like is just very short-sighted, and lacks a lot of perspective. Like, again, like we had entire movements of art come before without people being able to sell their work. You can still sell your work right now. There are still people buying work, and I just feel like any complaints and everything else is just wasting your time. And if anything, I feel like you're just kind of signaling to everybody else how little perspective you actually have on this current market, your place in kind of the broad art, trajectory. It's kind of the broad art, history. So I don't know. I would say run from people who are complaining right now and embrace those that are, showing up every day and making art.
I love that, man. I love that. Look, this has been a great conversation, man. Love having you on, and really excited for this LG drop. And so, we're glad to be in partnership with you, and glad to be taking this journey together.
Oh, that means a lot. I just want to say thank you to the both of you. Really appreciate you, thinking of me with this, and I'm excited to partner with you on it.
We couldn't think of a better person, man. And again, appreciate your insights, and thank you so much for joining us on the show, man.
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, guys.
All right, take care. Well, that was a great conversation. I really enjoyed it, man. What stood out to you from it?
Man, there's so many things that stood out for me, but more importantly, I think the courage that he has to make up like a statement, right? Like so many artists are in this day and age so afraid to make a political statement or make a statement, period, right? Like we live in an age of cancel culture. We live in an age where, there's real actual consequences financially and socially to making specific messages. And what I love about him is that, like, to this day, there's an arrest warrant for him from Hong Kong. And he's just like, yeah, I just can't travel, but I'm still going to be creating elements. The other thing that really stood out for me was his concept of thinking of blockchains as major cities, right? Like how artists can distribute their art on different blockchains from different communities, from different cultures, the same way that they can showcase their physical works in different cities for different moments. And so I really appreciate that. And more particularly, man, I love his vision, dude. He's such a long-term thinker, and he knows what it's like to take chances, but also to sacrifice, right? Like he's been in the game for over a decade doing digital art and glitch art in a way that wasn't monetizable when he first started. So overall, man, the dude is fucking awesome. I love his vision, and like I just fuck with him heavy. That's all it is. Like that's the real talk.
I hear you, man. No, I think and look, I'm super excited that Patrick's the first artist, for our partnership with LG Art Lab. I think that he, like you said, is just he's got like, he's really passionate, and he really, his work, like he speaks through his work in terms of what he finds important, what his values are, and he's not afraid to stand up for what he believes in. And I think he's been showing up every day during this bear market, during the tough times as well as the good times, and I think that I really enjoyed getting to hear his thoughts a little bit deeper on things like privacy, on where the rise of AI and what that will mean, and just all of the different topics he's across. So really excited to have him be a part of this partnership and to help kick off what is an exciting new chapter for us.
Yeah, guys, and just remember, if you like this episode, please leave a comment, a review, give us 5 stars wherever you listen, anything from Spotify to iTunes or wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Any and all help is here. And, it goes without saying, if you're interested in buying this art piece that Patrick is dropping, check out lgrlabs.com and check out the piece. Till next time.
Let's catch you next week on the NFT Now podcast.